I want to introduce Gail. Gail is going to be talking to us about RFID. So she is with Tamarack Products, and I will let you introduce yourself.
I'm good.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, just a little gauge. RFID, little, lot, little, lot, little, lot. All right. Okay. I think I'm okay. It was hard because they said a half an hour to cover RFID. So, I mean, come on, that's really hard, right? So what I did is I tried to pick out the things. We're an equipment manufacturer, so we make the insertion equipment. We get converters to our factory all the time to come see the equipment, and we sit in the conference room and they ask a series of questions. And so that's kind of what I tailored this on, are the questions I get asked a lot. So hopefully that's relevant. I think it might be. My tendency is to talk really fast, and I know I'm in limited time, so if I do, just like stand up back there or somewhere and say, slow down. A little bit about me. I work for Tamarack. I've worked there my entire life. My mom was their second employee in 1973. And so when I came out of college in 1992, I came on full time. So I've been in this for a while. I'm not exactly a label leader of tomorrow, but I kind of am. I got another decade in this, right? And Tamarack has been putting equipment into the RFID market for 25 years. Our first installation was in 2000. So the market has changed a lot in that time frame. I'm very proud to say that that machine installed in 2000 is still converting today, so it's still inserting. What this means to you is that there's always this fear of, what if I buy the wrong thing? The market's changing. I can tell you that one we installed 25 years ago is still relevant to what the market needs today. There's been some changes, but not a ton. All right, so I thought I should start with an RFID market size, which is incredibly hard to find, even with ChatGPT. And so I went really conservative here, all right? So there's all sorts of spectrum. This is really conservative. I thought it was important to tell you we're in the billions here. The first number, 15 billion, now 37 billion in 2032. If we take the RFID tags and labels out of that, that's about 4 billion. So the first number, it includes like readers and infrastructure and all that. So the second number is kind of what you're more interested in. And those numbers, some of them were double that. So I don't think anybody really knows, but what we do know is that it's double-digit growth. So why, after 25 years, are we talking about this now? Why is everybody all excited about RFID? I can tell you there's really three reasons here. The cost of the inlays have gone down crazy. They're half of what they were back when we started this. I put 4 cents to 7 cents. That's about what I hear. It really depends on quantities, but some of the inlays can get up to 20, 30 cents, depending upon the frequencies and the applications, even higher than that. So, but most of what we're going to talk about today is in that range. The quality of the inlays. Again, when we first started this, believe it or not, a roll of inlays would have 30% bad. So only 70% were good. So what happened is that's not really helping any efficiencies when you're putting 30% bad onto things, right? So what they would have to do is they would have to take out 30%, put in good ones, or there were complicated equipment methods to do that, or a bunch of people in a back room that did that, but it wasn't efficient. Now we're seeing 99.7, 99.8 good on a roll, which still means there's 2 or 3 out of 1,000 bad, right? So there are ways to deal with that. We're not going to get in that today, but there are ways. But the most important thing is the business case has changed. When I first used to go to trade shows about RFID, the first thing people would ask me is, gosh, the inlays are so expensive. Barcodes are free. Why would I want to put RFID on it? The fact is that they're a supplement to barcodes. They're not replacing barcodes, and they can do so much more than a barcode. So concentrating on that, going into some business cases. What are people using it for? Starting out with luggage. If you've gone into Las Vegas airport or flown Delta Airlines, you may have gotten an RFID enabled tag or a ticket. that is a great market for RFID. It was going to be a real thing in 2019, then COVID. So the airlines and the airports were having a hard time. They weren't going to invest in the infrastructure, but we're seeing this as a real growth area, and should continue to equip more airports, more airlines. Transportation, I show UPS there because they've really been a front runner on this. If you get a UPS box, there'll be the label where you have your name. I should have brought one, but I didn't. And then there's another little label called the rider label, and that's got an RFID in it. So the RFID is going on the packages, and then the readers are even going on the trucks and in the warehouse, so they can really tell your package was taken off the truck at this location. So it is a way of really optimizing. And then, of course, in the distribution. And I've got a couple quotes I found here that I found interesting. The first one, the important part is the last line, eliminated 20 million barcode scans from daily operations. 20 million from daily operations. That's crazy. The second one, they're trying to go from scanning based to sensing based. And then the third one, they talk about this SPSF, which I didn't mention, but that's their platform. And I thought this was interesting because, again, we're talking about business case. They're talking about elevating the customer experience, but he also mentions while reducing the carbon footprint. So now we're getting into a whole nother level of interest when you can start having these companies talk about reducing their carbon footprint. So I've been hearing more and more about that, actually. We look at another front runner on this, that would be Chipotle. I don't know how many of you remember the Chipotle food, E. coli, where all of a sudden everybody was getting sick. It's not everybody, because look, it's sick in 1,100 people. So, but it was huge. It affected their business, and I learned that they had a $25 million fine. But I think the more important thing is their sales went down. They learned that they need to track the goods. They need to make sure that they know what's coming into their store. They need to put RFID so they know when things have expired. And so this business case was food traceability and food safety. And, in this market, you're going to hear more and more about food safety because there's some real stringent guidelines coming the way on that one. And not just Chipotle, there's other fast food, McDonald's, and they're starting to all come into line with this, but Chipotle was definitely a front runner. Staying in the food realm, a more recent one is Kroger. They are doing something very unique. They're tagging their perishables. So they're trying to get it so that in the bakery, you can put it on the blueberry muffins, and you know that these blueberry muffins are going to expire tomorrow, so you can rotate them to the front, or you can put that 50% off sticker on it and try to get them to move. And wait, nobody's eating the blueberry muffins, and so I think maybe we need to change our formula, or we need to change to chocolate chip muffins. And so all this data is another business case. They're trying to figure out, and everybody's trying to figure out what's selling, how to increase sales, what's not selling. An interesting thing about Kroger is that they're trying really hard to do it under the initiative of zero hunger, zero waste, I think it is. So they're honing in on the let's reduce hunger by not throwing out so much food. And then, of course, we got to get to the big one, Walmart. Walmart has driven a lot of this. I know, in the 2008 timeframe, they had all this Walmart hubbub. Everything's going to be RFID enabled, and then it just dropped off. And so many people think that Walmart just gave up. They didn't. Things were being tagged all over the place. I'd have people come and they'd be like, "Oh, Walmart's not doing anything." Well, if you had a pair of jeans, they've been tagging these for years. But the RFID inlay is under this one. And so you may not notice that. You may not even, you take it off, you throw it away. You don't even notice there's an RFID label under it. And that's true with a lot of things. I have some examples here. I heard you guys like things passed around, so I did little bins that show some of the different products. I went into Nordstrom's. I thought this was interesting. They're tagging the shoes. They tagged both shoes, and I don't know. the RFID tag on the bottom of the shoe when people are trying them on and walking around on carpet, and I'm not sure that's a good idea, but I thought it was interesting because now the right and the left actually have tags. So the point there is that that was from Nordstrom Rack. Here's a tennis ball from Dick's Sporting Goods. Dick's Sporting Goods has been huge. Carter's has been huge. They've got their stuff tagged in their stores. So while Walmart gets a lot of the attention, retailers are really, really coming on board with this. So if we go into, let me just go ahead and, I want to wait 1 minute before passing it around. We're talking about just basic terminology, high level, active versus passive. Active has a battery, passive doesn't. So the passive is what we're using here. So if you look at an active, that's like your toll pass. Passive is all of these products you'll see here. Frequency, there's 3 that are really used in the industry. There's more, but three that I see often. Everything I'm going to show you, well, not all of them, but most of them are UHF. We do get some HF. HF is, if you want to see it like a foot away, that's used for libraries, to do library books. We see it in pharmaceutical. I'm not talking about pharmaceutical at all, but that's huge. Pharmaceutical, healthcare, authenticity, counterfeit drugs being used all over the place for that stuff. And then near field, that's when you have to tap it, so your hotel key cards, that sort of thing. It's used when you go to trade shows now, and you have it on your badge, and you go up and you touch it, that sort of thing. So that's a very close range. The antenna, basically there's 3 elements to it. The inlay, I've been saying inlay, so I thought I should just describe. There's an antenna, there's the chip, there's the carrier. So the carriers can be made of paper, or a lot of sustainability being done on that. It's kind of exciting, some of the sustainability going here. I'm not going to go in on it, but it's really exciting what they're doing with that, because they recognize you're tagging everything now, and you're creating something in the waste stream that is not ideal. Wet inlays and dry inlays. So a dry inlay, and a dry inlay is just that antenna. So this is going to require equipment that will cut between each one of these antennas. And there's no adhesive whatsoever on this. And so you have to actually replace the adhesive that you're covering with the label. When you put this on the back of the label, you're going to have a void area in your label. So you have to introduce something like a hot melt or a transfer tape. So the dry inlays are going to require more expensive equipment, but they're less expensive than a wet inlay. A wet inlay, I have rolls of each of these in these bins, and so when we pass them around, you'll be able to see the 2 different types. A wet inlay is a converted dry inlay. So it has adhesive on the back, and it looks like a label. Sometimes just the wet inlays are put on the product and not converted into a bigger inlay. The wet inlays sometimes can look very much like a dry inlay. So that one had a paper on it, but like something like this, it looks just like a dry inlay, but it has the adhesive on the back. So let me go ahead and, I've got 2, so we can do it each side. Oh, and then there's this has just some different inlays on it. So, what did I do with this? So when we look at the pros and cons of dry inlays and wet inlays, the wet inlays are going to cost you a little bit more because they do have that conversion process. It will depend on the type of inlay you have, how much it costs, but you think about a penny more or 12 to 20% more in your material costs. So at some point that does come into play when you're doing millions. But a lot of people use wet inlays because they're easy. They're easy to put down. The equipment's easier. The equipment's less expensive. Another disadvantage of wet inlays is that you do have limited adhesion options. So if you have something, for example, a label that goes on a tire, and I didn't realize it. I saw a conference by a tire manufacturer, and they're like, it's really hard to inventory tires because they're all round and black. And I never really thought about that. But so they like to put stickers on them. That's going to require a real aggressive adhesive. Pharmaceutical, they're a little bit crazy about changing adhesives. So if you're in pharma, you can't change anything without a ton of testing. And so for pharma, it's nice to be able to introduce a transfer tape that matches the adhesive that they require. So that might be a time to use a dry inlay. The dry inlays, as converters, you can get a lot more on a roll. And so you're stopping a machine less often in order to keep production going than you would with a wet inlay. I think that's it.
Is there a difference in the speed of how these are inserted, the dry versus the wet on the equipment?
Well, that's a really good question. So the question is there a difference in the production speed of the equipment? We personally don't see that. There are obviously our competitors. I'm not sure what their answer would be to that, but for Tamarack equipment, we run them at the same speed. You get a little tighter accuracy with the dry inlays, just because what you're doing is you're cutting them, you're putting them on a vacuum drum, and the registration is really, really tight. Wet inlays, you might have a little more, but we're talking it's minimal. So going into the insertion equipment, we're just going to talk about offline and inline here. This is inline on press. So if you have a flexo press that you're printing here, we split the press and we go in the middle here. So you're printing, inserting your inlay, and then going to your die cutting. And then on this end, we always inspect. And so we're always going to make sure that during the process, nothing's being damaged. And so we go ahead and do an inspection, make sure that the inlay is good, and mark it if it's bad. Somebody will let me know if I'm going over, right? Okay. So inline and press has the benefit that you start in with the blank roll, and by the time the end you're done. It also has some disadvantages, which we'll go into in just a minute. The other advantage here that we should point out is that it reuses your existing flexo equipment. A lot of people are like, well, I got this flexo press sitting here, it's not doing much, I want to repurpose it, in which case it is nice because you can reuse your unwind, rewind, and die cutting. So if we go offline, we're seeing more and more interest to offline, and most of our competitors go offline. So when you hear about people doing converting, typically it is an offline process. So they go ahead and they print it on press and they bring it to this machine, which re-registers to the print. Other than that, it's really the same. You go in from this is going to be your printed label now. You're going to separate it so that the label face stock is going up high, the liner's going down low. Insert the inlay, bring them back together, and then you do your final die cutting. So as far as inline or offline, the process is very similar. I have a bigger drawing here. So here again, we've split the press. We've split our press here, but there's no printing. But if we were printing, it'd happen here. These components here, this is the vacuum cylinder and the cutting cylinder, and then here's the hot melt unit. So you don't need those components if you're just doing wet inlays. We have a lot of people just doing dry inlays, and then we have people that can do wet and dry. The addition of the equipment is substantial to go to dry. So a lot of people start out with wet and then just move on to dry when they get the business. So when we look at an inline versus offline, you're looking at the space in your facility. When you split your press, sometimes you don't have room. You've got walls. You can't split your press. You can't add 10 or 12 feet. Or maybe you want to do it offline, so you have your own department to do it. The biggest one is this printing methods. Now that digital printing is so loved, if you want to print everything flexographically, put it on your flexo press. But if you have to sometimes print digitally, sometimes print flexo, an offline will probably be your best option. Speeds, going to your question about speeds. Sometimes it can slow, well, almost always you're going to slow down your press for insertion. It depends on what you want to do. We're going to talk a little bit about encoding, but encoding will slow down your speeds right now. Reading used to, but reading technology has gotten so good that it doesn't slow down our speeds anymore. Encoding will, depending upon exactly what the chip is and what you want to encode. The operator experience, operators in general, some people have an operator shortage, so they want to go inline because they don't want to equip another press. The process, some people like make a whole bunch of base material, inventory it, and then put the insertion later, in which case you're better with offline. And it's more complex if you have a lot of things to do afterwards. So the labels can get, they're going to always be read and verify they're good when they come off the press. I would never advise anybody to run them and not check them. You don't know if you got them from the inlay manufacturer bad, right? If you never check it. And then sometimes you need to encode it. Sometimes you're going to have to put the data into the chip. And then sometimes you need to also match that data to a printed barcode. And we're seeing it's going to be moving towards a 2D barcode, a GS1 barcode. Right now, we're still doing a lot of 1Ds, but it's moving to 2D and we're moving to serialization. So if you have two identical products, you'll know which one it is because each one will have their own unique number. So if you got 2 cans of tennis balls, you'll know that this can is different than this can, even though they're exactly the same. And so the variable data printing, working with industry partners to do that. I know Domino's in the room, working with them, so that we can pick up the information that's going on the chip, and that information can then be duplicated with a human readable or a barcode on the label. That's all stuff that sounds really scary, but people are figuring it out. It's become very normal to do, so it's not as bad as it was just even last year. Last year you couldn't encode at the speeds we're encoding now, so the changes just in a year have been crazy good. So that's it. How'd I do?
You did amazing. I was going to give you 5 more minutes. So.
Really?
Yeah. So how about questions?
That's awesome. I'm like, I got to get through all this. I was going to show some equipment videos. I have them, obviously, but I knew time would be short. But if anybody wants to see them, I do have them available. We can make some time later this afternoon or tomorrow morning. I am staying overnight, so just let me know. Other than that, are there any questions?
How many people are doing RFID in the room? Sorry, there was arms went up. I overrode you, so please, who had questions?
For the encoding, is it just a numerical code, or can you have alphanumeric? I went to an RFID conference once, and I was a little bit confused about this because, say we were to use it for inventory control for our material, would you then just use the serial number associated with that roll, or could we add our own, material with an internal spec number to this serial number for the roll? And how much, room do you have to put that?
Yeah, it's a little chip dependent, but yeah, you can add all the information. You can add things like, we talked about Kroger expiration dates. You can put that in there. So it can actually handle a lot of information, because used for exactly that. Yeah.
And you would just have like a CSV file or some kind of file.
Yep. 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 Yeah.
How many lanes are you guys inlaying?
Oh, okay, good question. So this, she asked how many lanes can we do? This is a 2-lane, and 2 lanes very, very common. We do up to 6 lanes. And so,
Inline and offline?
yes. In fact, we've only do 6 lanes on inline. At that point, you're talking about such high quantities that they've always chose inline. We have done 4 lanes on offline, but we haven't yet done 6. There's no reason why we couldn't, but it just hasn't been chosen. Usually when they go to 6, they're running some massive volumes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
You had mentioned sustainability benefits
Yeah.
or concerns. Can you elaborate on that?
Well, You're putting it on a box that then is going to be recycled, right? It was interesting. I've been to 3 RFID conferences in the last 4 months. There was one at Auburn University. They have a lab there that where they test things for really end users. And then I went to one RFID Journal Live, and then to the GS1 Summit. At the GS1 Summit, there was a very interesting presentation by a gentleman from West Rock about recyclability. The important thing to note is that it doesn't affect the recyclability of the carton. In his case, he was talking about corrugated, but it's pulled out of the waste stream, right? It's not recyclable in and of itself, but it doesn't affect the recyclability of the carton, which was the really, really important thing. You don't want that. All those you'll see there are not paper-based, but they're working with paper-based, so that too would then would be able to go into the recycling stream. As far as an antenna and a chip, there's not much you can do. But they're working on it. They're working on it. There's chipless technology out there. I mean, they're trying really hard to do it. But to my knowledge, it's not there yet. But especially in Europe, I think in the U.S. we don't care as much. But in Europe, it's a huge, huge factor. I mean, the thought about putting an RFID on every single item just scares the heck out of them. And rightfully so. It's not great, right?
With GS1 codes now, and I guess the drivers for RFID, a lot of like the Walmarts or whatever, are looking at for inventory control, and like that's where they're gonna save the money, and it's worth like putting the chips on. But GS1 codes being variable also kind of solves that issue of inventory control. So do you see these complementing each other, or do you think that as these variable codes roll out there, it reduces some of the need for RFID?
Interesting question. And it brings up something that I should have said. Line of sight. Line of sight is your answer right there. A code's always going to have to be scanned. But you're right. What he's talking about is GS1. That's the 2D barcodes that are coming into play. You can code those. 1D barcode, you have 1 point of data. The GS1, you can put. I think it's 17, so you do the little code 17, and then they know that that's going to be the expiration date after it. So it's a lot of coding to allow you to have a lot of that data that you're talking about there. But where RFID comes in is the line of sight. An interesting application that I heard about at the GS1 is that if you have an RFID and a GS1 code, GS1 allows you to serialize. By serialize, I mean, that what I talked about where the 2 products are the same product, but they got different numbers. So it's amazing how one thing I didn't talk about, I have so much to talk about, the anti-theft, the anti-theft and the shrinkage is a huge business case for this, right? They don't like to talk about it because it feels very self-serving. But it's a fact so if you have a situation where somebody is doing like the self-checkout and they go and they scan it with the GS1 barcode, but then they try to walk out a portal that has RFID readers, there'll be a communication there to say, hey, there was a product there that was not scanned, and as you go out. So there is the ability to use those in tandem in order to do that, which is very exciting for these people. But really, line of sight's the bag tags, being able to run it through a portal and have it be read rather than have somebody there to do it. That's where RFID really shines. And as I was talking about that, the sustainability question, the business case on that is the carbon footprint and the efficiencies outweigh the benefit. And that's what they're really working on, is trying, it's like by not having to redirect all this stuff, by having your warehouses more efficient, by not having the waste, by not having that pallet of Advil in the back get expired before it gets shipped out. I guess this stuff happens all the time. There'll be pallets of stuff that gets expired in pharma, and then they find it, and then it's just garbage. And so a lot of sustainability is built built around that, being more efficient and making sure we're not throwing stuff away. I don't know, fun stuff? All right.
So you mentioned the wet inlays, and it has the adhesive built in. So do you put the adhesive in? Do you configure that, or work with partners, adhesive partners?
For the wet inlays, our equipment, in theory, can make a wet inlay out of a dry inlay. But that's really not our intention. We try to change the pitch of it. So, we put, a 7/8 inch inlay on a 4-inch label. That's kind of the intention. Most people buy their wet inlays from their inlay manufacturer. So you would call your inlay manufacturer and you would say if you want wet or dry. That's how it'd be delivered.
All right, well, thank you, Gail. Gail's going to be around.